Good morning, and welcome to each and every one of you this morning. I want to especially welcome the Auditor General and her team here this morning, the representatives from the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, and the representatives of the Ministry of Finance. There are members of the media here present. I want to welcome them also. And there are no members in the public gallery. My name is Durant-Tangwell. I'm the chair of the committee. And in a few moments, I'll have members of the committee introduce themselves. The purpose of this meeting of the Public Accounts Committee is to examine the report of the Auditor General on the public accounts of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year 2016, 17, and 18, with specific reference to the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. We have examined the Ministry of Industry in relation to these Auditor General's report, Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries in relation to these reports before. And what this is a follow-up on the implementation of the recommendations in the reports of the PAC, the fourth one, the 14th one, and the 20th report of the PAC. So this is really a follow-up to see if any of the things we said or any of the recommendations we made have been taken seriously and acted upon by the various agencies on whom to whom action has been requested. So based on the issues identified, the key stakeholders are the Auditor General's Department, of course, because it's their report that we use to examine the various ministries and entities, the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. And the reason we want to follow up on this is because energy is so critical to the lifeblood and the revenue stream of the country. Fully 40% of the revenues come from the energy industry. And of course, the Ministry of Finance, because they are a critical ministry in any country, because they basically manage revenue and expenditure and keep the day-to-day accounts in view, so to speak, as the business of government is conducted. This meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on the Parliament's Channel 11 and Radio 105.5 FM and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's topic via email parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com/ttparliament, and Twitter @parliament. So what I want to do now is to say welcome once again to all the representatives here gathered, and I will ask the Auditor General's Department, the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, and the Ministry of Finance representatives to introduce themselves, and then I will ask the members of my committee to introduce themselves, members of the PAC. Okay, so could we start with the Auditor General's Department?
Good morning, Dr. Durant-Tangwell and members of the Public Accounts Committee. I am Laurie Pujadas, Auditor General, and with me are my team, who are primarily responsible for the audit of the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries.
Good morning, Gary Peters, Assistant Auditor General.
Good morning, Brian Caesar, Audit Executive 2.
Energy. Yeah.
Good morning, Sandra Fraser, Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Energy. I'm here this morning with members of my team, and with your leave, sir, I would just like them to introduce themselves briefly. starting
Sure.
with
Speak
Mr.
into the microphone, please. It's difficult to hear.
Sorry. With your leave, I'd like to introduce members of my team from my left, starting with Mr. Bihari.
Good morning, Chair and members. I am Monty Bihari, Director of Minerals.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mark Rudder, Petroleum Operations Director.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sheldon Butcher, the Director of Downstream Petroleum Management Division.
Okay.
Good morning, Chair and members. I am Louise Boywing, Senior State Counsel, performing the functions of Head of Legal.
Good morning, everyone. I am Minawati Singh, Director of Human Resource Services.
Good morning, Chair and other members. I am Susan Durant-Tangwell, Accountant Executive 1 at the Ministry.
Okay. Ministry of Finance, please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Suzette Taylor-Leachy, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Cherry-Ann Legendre, Director of Budgets, Budget Division, Ministry of Finance.
Good morning, everyone. I am Nalisha Bali, Treasury Director, Treasury Management in the Ministry of Finance.
Good morning, Chairman and committee members. I am Ravi Taklal Singh, Commissioner, Inland Revenue.
Good morning, Janine Karaya, Economist to Inland Revenue Division.
All right. Thank you very much for being here and for introducing yourself. I'll ask members of my committee if they will now introduce themselves. I'll start on my left with Independent Senator Sipasad.
Good morning. I'm Cherie Sipasad, member.
Hi, good morning. Ayana Webster Roy, member.
Good morning, Adrian Leons, member.
Okay. And I introduced myself already. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I didn't see you. Sorry.
Morning, everyone. Lester Henry, member.
All right. Thank you very much for attending. And I am Boindra Tiwari and chair of the committee. I want to ask at this point if the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries would like to make a brief opening statement.
Thank you, Chair. The Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries, like any other ministry, continues to face our respective challenges. We have been able to make some headway in terms of the following areas, such as our pension and leave, our various recording functions, and in the area of monitoring and evaluation. There's still, however, some work to be done in terms of service commission, in terms of the approved framework, the area of production verification, and the area of service delivery. We acknowledge the comments of the Auditor General and are taking measures in an effort to improve the way that the ministry conducts its business. It continues to be a working process, and we therefore look forward to this review and all parties gaining an appreciation of the ministry's requirements at this time. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Thank you very much. PS, Ministry of Finance, would you like to say something?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, on behalf of the Ministry of Finance team, I wish to thank you for the opportunity to appear before the committee today. This is a matter of great importance for the Ministry of Finance, and we undertake to work with the Ministry of Energy to support all efforts to improve the verification and audit process for revenue collection. So again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and we look forward to any questions you may have for the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you very much. Auditor General, would you like to make a brief opening statement before we proceed with the questioning?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I acknowledge with appreciation the comments and observations and recommendations that was put forward by the committee in the review of the 2016, 2017, and the 2018 Auditor General's report with specific reference to the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries. I just want to reiterate what you've started off saying this morning, that the Ministry of Energy and Energy has a key role in the area of revenue, and it is one of the main revenue earners of this country. And as a result of that, the ministry itself has a wide range of activities that pertains to the various revenue streams. And so it is always of concern for the Auditor General and for the taxpayers at large that we can provide the level of assurance that they need that the country is receiving all the revenue from the various revenue streams emanating from natural resources. We take note that the ministry has started off saying this morning that they're making efforts to improve on the verification process, and that is key as well for our work, because we need to provide the assurance that you all are doing just that. I just want to reiterate that the World Bank has presented 5 elements of the value chain, and we would want to be assured that those 5 elements, that the ministry has the capacity, both in human resources and technical competencies and skills, in that particular value chain. The value chain that is alluded to and enunciated by the World Bank is the award of contracts and licenses, regulation and monitoring of operations, collection of taxes and royalties, revenue management and allocation, and of course, sustainability and development of policies and of projects. So we just want to be assured that the processes that are implemented by the Ministry of Energy at this time and going forward would facilitate, improvements in those 5 elements of the value chain. Thank you, Chair, for this opportunity.
All right. Thank you all. I just would like one member who just joined us, Minister Mitchell, to introduce himself.
Good morning. I am Randall Mitchell, member.
All right, and thank you very much again. We're very happy to have you here, and we'll proceed with the questions. As we normally do in this committee, I will start by asking a few questions, and then we will spread out to all members here to either follow up on my own questions or initiate questions of their own. And we all try to take turns in asking questions that are relevant and pertinent to the public at large and important to the business of governance. Now, this is a follow-up review, you might say. All right, and I want to start by asking some basic questions to the Ministry of Energy. Now, given the importance of the revenue contribution of energy, you are a very important, in fact, critical ministry. And the revenue generation potential and value to the government and people of Trinidad and Tobago is really significant, all right? How would you assess yourself in terms of success in, first of all, providing or having access to and providing reliable production data in energy, and consequently to insist on revenue collection that is due to the country by providing that accurate production data? How do you assess your success? Okay? Go ahead.
Chair, with your leave, I would like to have my Director of Downstream Management answer the questions on the production data and the revenue collection, please.
Okay.
Thank you very much, PS. Good morning once again. So that's a question I think directs us to the work that we have been doing in the very short term on looking at production verification. Okay, so it's something that we were very mindful of internally to the ministry. we will have put together an internal committee consisting of various technical divisions and units.
When did you
Support
put
staff.
that committee together?
It would have been sometime in May of last year? Yeah, May of last year?
Of
Sorry,
2018?
May of this year, May of this year? Yeah.
May 2019?
Yes, of.
Okay.
All right, so the first meeting we had, was actually March of this year. So we had 5 meetings of the committee, and the intention was to conduct a preliminary desktop research into production verification systems of countries and see where there could be some parallels that we could draw on. So we took analysis of what we currently do in terms of assessing production levels and verifying the numbers as the system currently stands. And we would have put together a report, which is currently being reviewed and finalized on some of the discussions that we had internally to the ministry. So if I could put that as the basis of the view that we have right now, I think that we are making positive inroads into maximizing the value derived from the production of oil, gas, and condensate in country, and we continue to improve as we go along the lines of the outcomes of the Production Verification Committee.
How would you respond if I said, we raised some of these issues in 2016, we raised some of them in 2017, we raised them in 2018, and we have an Auditor General's report due in 2020 April,
right,
based on 2019, and that my judgment would be that you took too long a time and came to the issue too late to establish a committee to try and look at this issue. And I will have some follow-up questions on the work of the committee itself, but I mean, how would you respond to the fact of my saying that, or asking you the question, why did you take so long?
Okay. The time that it took to actually have the persons meeting for the first time was because of some staffing challenges in the ministry around the time of receiving the suggestions from the Auditor General and from the feedback of the committee as well, and in thinking through the best way that we can actually make some inroads. And that had some internal discussions, and we will sort of have the best representatives of the various divisions and units sit in the committee. So that took a little time, but when we met, we will have had a very strong terms of reference from the get-go, and we sort of drove home as to what we needed to achieve in a very short space of time.
Okay, and what are some of the issues that you identified from your desktop research that other countries are doing that we are not doing but need to do?
Okay, so the full details of that, I think if I may ask, we could respond in a subsequent communication because the document is being reviewed internally and finalized. And
okay, so you're not ready for public discussion of
not
those?
at this time.
Okay. And when I think I read in one of the documents that when you do this, you have either embarked upon or are going to embark upon a second round of research of to identify things that are applicable to Trinidad and Tobago. How long is this thing going to take? How long is your internal review of the first report going to take? And when are we going to get to the point where we know what we are doing in Trinidad and Tobago?
Okay. So the first round will involve a desktop review of systems. Now, what we saw was that not a lot of information is found by online sources for how a lot of different countries would manage production verification. So we sought assistance from industry associations as well as contacts that certain persons would have had who will be on the committee to the industry. And so we sort of pull together that information. But in the second round, it may be more of an exercise of going out to some of the options of countries that has similar sort of settings to us, as well as countries that will have adjusted their system over time. And we could have seen how that trend goes. So the timing, I won't be able to say at this point how long that second phase would take. But for the first phase, we are looking within the next few months to actually have that first report reviewed and finalized before going on to the second phase.
Okay. I find for something so important, it's really taking long, and perhaps the methodologies, I mean, it's one thing going on the internet and doing the desktop research, but I mean, we have relations with so many countries. We are also part of OPEC. I mean, I know that the geopolitical value of OPEC is now diminished. We have relations with other energy-producing countries. I mean, couldn't we do this at a governmental level or ministerial level, or at a level that would be more expeditious and much more focused? I mean, why do we take the wrong route and the tortuous route when we could take not necessarily a shortcut, but a direct route?
Thank you for that question. We have engaged some intergovernmental associations. We have engaged the Gas Exporting Countries Forum, which is our international forum that is kind of like a gas equivalent to OPEC, if I could use those terms loosely. And we've sought information on production verification systems around the member countries. So we have used our associations and our membership to our advantage.
To get additional data.
To get the point where we are. But in going forward, we'll need to do some further steps.
All right, I'll stop at this point, and I'll ask my colleagues who would like to ask next. Would you like to follow? Yes.
Forgive me if I'm repetitive, but you will have a project plan for this project, yes?
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us or give us an idea of the time frame for the actual implementation? I love your stories, but I think we need to know when is this thing going to happen so that we could verify the data. And how far back are you going to go in terms of the verification process?
So with the outcomes that we've had in the preliminary report that is currently being reviewed and finalized, it may not be enough for us just to use what we've uncovered, because it doesn't really put it into the sort of framing of next steps. But certainly it would be where we realize what sort of model could work for us, and we go into the second stage where we do some further discussions and further meetings with subject matter experts and so forth. It will be as I see it, it will be a phased rollout of some of the improved systems, and that could mean that you have early adoption in certain areas, and maybe some later on in other areas. So the details of that, I'm not in any way prepared to really relate a time frame at this stage for the rollout. But it has to go through some more internal processes in the ministry. So at this stage, it's just premature of me to really comment at this point.
Yeah, well, I noticed, just a quick response here, I noticed that there's in the documents an indication that we might have something written as a draft by January 2020. But I don't know how much that will do for actualizing a system that works. Sure. Okay, so I didn't mean to cut you, but please go ahead.
I'm not comfortable with your response because I don't think anybody on the committee has a real sense of where this project is and what is the end outcome of it. So I'm really not comfortable by your response because I really don't know.
Right.
And in the interim, what steps are you all taking to verify the data? because we have to operate in the meantime while your project is ongoing. What steps are you all taking to fill the gaps, I would think, in the meantime?
Yeah. Okay, so thank you for the question. In relation to the work that has been going on in the Production Verification Committee, all through the ministry, we are mindful of the need to, where possible, and the system allows for it right now, to continue to do some quality checks, continue to do quality checks, quality assurance of the data that we have, and apply those strong framings where they exist in particular divisions and units into others. So we are on the road to getting the production verification systems improved, but while we are building on top of that, I think that we continue to strive to improve it internally as we go towards that point. Now, as I said, the work is an ongoing one. It's an internal focus for review and finalization. I think January 2020 is a fair time for the completion of this first phase, and in mapping the way that the second phase.
But that report will only say what you discern that other countries do, and what you discern from what they do that might be of value. I don't think it'll go more than that based on my understanding of what you said would be available.
Okay, so I'll just ask our Director of Petroleum Operations Management to comment.
Right, so just to add to what Mr. Butcher was saying, the contents of the report will review a desktop study of other countries we were able to find from sources online and from documentation, but it's also reviewing the current Ministry of Energy process as well. And we are looking to see whether there are any gaps in the process of the Ministry of Energy that need to be filled. So it will review the ministry process, it will document the ministry process, it will identify gaps in the ministry process, and also indicate recommendations for filling those gaps, which will then go to the permanent secretary, who will then determine whether to accept those recommendations or not. It will also provide recommendations for the way forward. This committee was set up to do a fact-finding mission. Another committee will need to be set up to actually implement the recommendations of the committee. The committee is made up of all the divisions that have any linkage with production data. So it's a very big committee. A smaller committee will need to be developed to actually implement the recommendations if accepted. Once they're implemented, the next stage, of course, which was recommended by the Auditor General, is an audit of the new system to see whether it benchmarks with best practice internationally. Right?
Member Mitchell.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just want to follow up on that line of questioning. And thank you for the update on the work of the committee so far. But I want to take us back to 2016. In 2016, Mr. Chair, I was just a few months into this job, and in 2016, we had the Ministry of Energy before us. In 2016, if my memory serves me correct, we had the oil price going down to perhaps as low as $26. And we also had falling oil production. And it was very important to this Public Accounts Committee to have the Ministry of Energy before us. Because prior to coming into this job, I knew that the Ministry of Energy played a very significant role. And the oil and gas industry was the lifeblood of this country's revenue. And in 2016, what we had before us, and pardon me, we had a chuckling permanent secretary who described a situation to us where the system of verification was someone from the Ministry of Energy going out or not going out to assess meters that were calibrated or not calibrated, because there was no information to suggest either way. We had documentation coming back that was unsigned. And that is what the Auditor General reported. That was shocking to me, that we could not verify what the multinationals were reporting to us, nor those lease operators. It was shocking because the Permanent Secretary was chuckling, and I will always remember that. So this to me is a very, very serious situation. And the Ministry of Energy is now before us and is telling us about work of a committee and potential gaps that need to be filled when clearly there are gaps. Clearly we need to understand what the multinationals are reporting to us in terms of production is correct so that we know what our tax revenue ought to be, because our oil and gas resources are depleting and we need all that we can get. You're telling us that the work of the committee will be completed in 2020. What can you tell us today? How is the information being audited and assessed? Tell us that.
Okay, so I'll just give you a short version of what we do in the ministry. I'm from the Petroleum Operations Management Division. Our role is, in terms of the calibration of meters, is a witness calibration of meters to ensure that the measurement system is working. When a visit is made by the ministry for a calibration, it is not picking up or detecting the actual production from a well or from a platform. It's just ensuring that the instrument itself is working. When it came up to the issue of calibration and whether meters are calibrated or not calibrated, in terms of dealing with that, we just said that some meters, we are not able to present all the meter calibrations, but all meters are calibrated and are witnessed by the company that owns the meter as well as the party that is receiving the production. All right? But in terms of the data coming to the ministry, there's no major linkage in terms of a value of production from a calibration, because there's no witnesses of a production figure when a calibration is being done, and the figures come into the ministry. The figures come into the ministry from the companies, and the other divisions of the ministry that receives the data, and the data is reviewed in terms of if any differences in terms of the production from one month to another, all right? And they are trended, and normally if there are major changes in the production figures, it raises a red flag, and the different divisions, for instance, there's contract management division that came up, they will look at the oil data, and there's Mr. Butcher's division will look at the gas data, all right? And they scrutinize the data, and if there's any variances in it, they will query, determine what is the issue, and document that information. That will normally be present on file and in monthly reports. All right. And then we also have other layers of verification. There is the PSC audit division that audits all the PSCs, and they do that on a yearly basis for all the PSCs. And they have a process for auditing, which will also track not only the volumes, but also the value that they get. And if they detect that there's a mismatch, they will require the company to pay back the money that they owed to the ministry. There's also another layer that exists as well in terms of the audits that are done by the ministry, by third parties, by an independent auditor. For instance, the Ryder Scott audits for gas. And we also conduct oil audits, but not at the frequency of a yearly basis. And normally with the gas audits, they can also pick up differences in terms of production and what that has to do with the reserves drawdown. All right? And they can, from that review, can also detect errors in the production reports sent to the ministry. All right? So the there is a system in the ministry for production verification. What we are looking at in the committee is where we can make improvements in the system. And the system that we have in the ministry is something that's obtained from past procedures that exist in the ministry. I think what has happened over time is that since the ministry has restructured, different divisions have been created and different functions have been created for different divisions. So it's really, I think what the Auditor General really wants is a desk manual to show the process, and we have to have the desk manual to show the process as the country relates to the current structure of the ministry in terms of the different divisions and their roles and responsibilities. All right, and that is what this committee that we have set up was just to do a fact-finding mission. The next committee, which will come after 2020, will then look at developing that desk manual. And that is what we envisage will happen. All right. In terms of I understand that you had a question about the time it took, why it took so long. We made a request for the committee to be set up in 2018. The former secretary at the time indicated we want to do the desk study first before we went into reviewing the current ministry system. All right, so I hope that provides some sort of clarity.
The petroleum inspectors, are they now signing the forms, the information that you're using as data?
Okay, so
when
the
they go out and they come back with the information?
Okay, so when a meter is calibrated in the field, a signing takes place in terms of a weakness of a calibration. So if there's a weakness of a calibration, the inspector's role is to sign at the weakness, the calibration. They're not signing the production figure.
Okay, how do you know, how do you verify what the multinationals say their production is? We were told that someone goes out there and checks a meter and they verify what is being reported.
So that is not what is done. What is done in the field is checking to see that the meter works.
What does the meter do?
All right, so the meter measures the gas rate. It also measures, in the case of gas meters, it also measures pressure, temperature, and to ensure that, because the meter is not giving, when you go to the meter, it's not giving a figure. It goes to a flow computer that goes into a control room, and there it is where the production figures will be calculated, and you get the figures, but that is a snapshot of, so if an inspector goes out there for a couple of hours, it's just a snapshot of what the production is at the time, but they're not looking at the production figure, they're just ensuring that the instrument works and is measuring correctly. So it's just a matter of either the meter is calibrated or the meter is not calibrated. And an independent company is there present to calibrate the instrument and to ensure that the meter factor, which is close to, which is 1, is obtained. And once that meter factor is obtained, system is calibrated, the inspector who's present signs off that the weakness that the meter is calibrated. And that's it. So it's nothing, so you're not actually seeing a production figure. You're not signing off on a
but it's a part of
verifying. It's a part of the process, yes.
It's part of the process of verifying it. Okay, so in terms of your system of verification, how would you give that a rating in terms of accuracy?
In my time in the ministry, I've never seen a situation to date where production figures had to be adjusted based on uncalibrated system, because most of the, if not all of the meters, there's a buyer and a seller. The buyer wants to ensure that that meter is calibrated because you want to make sure they're getting the value from what they are taking. All right, so it is an assurance process, yes, but you're just ensuring that the system works, but there's no connection, there's not a direct connection link in terms of doing that work and the production figures that come into the ministry on a monthly basis, only from the point of view that the data that's coming to the ministry should be coming from meters that are calibrated. All right, so, and the meters should be calibrated, and they're calibrated on a frequency basis. So that is the connection between the calibration and the data.
In terms of your system of verification, how accurate would you rate it in terms of a percentage?
So if I understand your question, how?
Okay, let me give some perspective.
Yes.
We've had an example in this country recently where someone involved in the oil industry was accused of ripping off the country. That was the accusation. And it revolved around the system of checks and balances and verification. The question is, how accurate, how robust would you describe your system of verifying what the oil and gas producers produce with what we are expected to receive in revenue?
Okay, so
royalties, tax revenue.
I wouldn't be able to answer the question because that's a issue that our division looks at. We just make sure that I think we have a very good confidence that all the systems, meters, are calibrated, and there's not an issue of non-calibration that feeds into the production data that we receive in the ministry. That is, I would see that as obtains in terms of changing the figures over time. All right. The other divisions in ministry that review the data, I wouldn't want to speak to what they do.
Their
okay?
issues, I understand.
Yes.
But I'm asking the question to the Ministry of Energy, not specifically to you. So anyone could answer the question.
Well, the overall charge, if she wishes to answer, because you are responsible and accountable to the ministry, for the ministry. Would you like to venture, or would you not like to say?
Chair, as my colleague said, there are several layers to the
I think what Minister Mitchell is asking is, notwithstanding all the explanations and so on, if you had to give a percentage number of the accuracy of the verification process that would then result in accurate production data and therefore accurate and authentic revenue information that is of value to the country, what percentage would you give it? 50%, 90%, whatever it is. He's asking you to hazard not an educated guess.
Chair, I prefer guess at this point in time.
Minister Mitchell. Are you comfortable enough that things are okay? I mean, you're the PS of this ministry involved in that. Are you comfortable enough that things are okay if you would not hazard a guess?
Chair, as my colleague said, there are several layers to the verification process. We continue to work, identify gaps, and we continue to look at where the gaps are, and we try to rectify them. Okay. And all I can say right now, it is a work in progress, and we work with the framework that we have been given right
But
now.
we can assume that there are gaps that need to be rectified.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that would not make it at the very minimum in terms of a guess. It would not be 100% accurate or close to it.
I would say this is not 100% accurate, but I would not be able to say the percentage, sir.
I understand. Thank you. Representative Ayana Webster-Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ministry of Energy, I would like to follow up on a question that my colleague asked, because like him, I was troubled by some of the responses in the past. There was a recommendation to the ministry the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries should identify independent entities to act on its behalf in instances where individuals from the measurement unit are incapable of being present at the calibration of meters. That recommendation was made, I think, a while back. What action, if any, has been taken to implement the recommendation, please?
Okay, we took on board the recommendation. This is something we're looking at in terms of the committee that we have set up called the Production and Verification Committee. And we were looking at the next step of the process is to look at all the meter systems that are present. There are different meter systems that some are custody transfer points, some are points that relate to royalties to the ministry. So what we're going to plan to do in the future is to look at all the systems and to rank them in terms of importance and priority. For instance,
in the
yes.
interim, who is seeking the interests of the state and the people of Trinidad and Tobago?
All right, so in interim, currently, we are looking at the Ministry of Energy has petroleum inspectors who are currently witnessing the calibration of meters. The meters that are not able to be witnessed at this current time are particularly the ones that are offshore. And the program we have in place currently is to witness those offshore meters twice a year. But we're witnessing all the other meters on land.
Is that twice a year time frame sufficient to ensure the interests of the people of Trinidad and Tobago and the state?
So those meters that are calibrated offshore, they also have another present party to those meters as well. Those are the gas meters. And they also a party present there, as well as all the production from gas also comes on shore. And we also checking every month for the meters onshore.
So how soon do we expect the recommendation to be fully implemented?
All right, so after we do a review of all the meters and the importance of each meter, we will then, the plan is to go to tender for a company or companies to provide assistance in that area for meters that we aren't able to witness. So the plan is, after the report is completed by January 2020 and submitted and the recommendations agreed to, in parallel, we are also working with the other divisions because the importance of those meters is not just a function of our division, it's also other divisions. And we are also working in parallel with them. So we hope to, in probably second quarter of 2020, to seek to go to tender for a party to assist the ministry as necessary. Because one of the things we want to make sure is that there is a need for us to look at the particular meters. And we want to go to tender, and there may be a situation where it may not be necessary for us to look at particular meters at a particular frequency.
There was another recommendation, and this might be for the Permanent Secretary. The Ministry of Energy and Energy Industry should develop an integrated system capable of compiling the information from the three divisions into a single reconciliation process when calculating revenue. Please provide an update.
No.
On page 5 of the
Yes,
submission.
thank you, we found it. The required response that we have to that request is the same Production Verification Committee, ma'am. For the integrated process.
My next question, Mr. Chair, if you permit me, to the Ministry of Finance. I know that we depend heavily on the revenue from the Ministry of Energy. Having listened to everything that's been said thus far, I would like you to provide some feedback, comments on what is the Ministry of Finance's view of what is happening, please. Thanks.
Okay. Well, we generally engage, we regularly engage with the Ministry of Energy at the level of production forecasts and pricing, and we have discussions around GDP. But arising out of this discussion, I think that the Ministry of Finance has to delve a little deeper into the process by which the projections or the information comes to us. And as well, the Treasury Division is also committed to assisting the Ministry of Energy with the processes that need to be implemented to ensure that, that the data is properly recorded and audited. Other than that, we can probably think about it a little more and provide a more in-depth response to the committee on how we can assist. Yes, all right.
Let me ask, you want to follow? You ready to ask? Okay, Senator Tahaka.
Thanks, Chair, and good day, everyone. Apologies for being late.
Yes, sir.
I'm an economist by trade, and energy economics is the cornerstone, this is the central point of our studies at the University of the West Indies, once one studies economics. And the Ministry of Energy came before us before, and they said that they would have committed to giving us data on production. Can I ask the question, what has the, how can we rely on the royalties due and the royalties paid when we are hearing today that you still have no idea as to the production measure, because all you do is check the calibration of the machines? Can we get any statement on that, Mr. Rudder?
I would like to pass this question to the Director of Downstream Petroleum Management, please.
Thank you very much for the question. So as we go through the topic of royalty, I just want to make a basic statement that kind of shows the difference between royalty on oil and condensate and royalty on gas. As it currently stands, the royalty on gas, natural gas, would be on natural gas sold, not on natural gas produced. And the basis of that natural gas sale or natural gas selling process would have a buyer and a seller. So when NGC buys gas for the domestic consumption, there's a certain quantity of gas that is purchased. And so when we look at the data coming in from the upstream suppliers, the BP, the BHP, the Shell, what have you, and NGC's data, we at the ministry looked at reconciling the numbers. Certainly, as Mark had said before, a buyer would want to buy what is a fair amount that is being sold and not an overage for which he doesn't get the value for. So in looking at how those numbers are put together, when we're looking at the royalty calculations, that sort of reconciliation, those sort of checks go into our calculations for forecast. And certainly when we get the actual gas sold for a given quarter, when we do our actual royalty calculations, those get fed into it as well.
So can I ask the question
Sure.
then?
Sure.
You all have no clue as to gas produced?
So I wouldn't say we have no clue. I'm saying that we do have a data collection mechanism to get those numbers from the points of production, which will be the gas supply companies, right, the upstreamers.
So can I ask the question, do you depend on the companies to provide that information, or do you have instruments that are there that the ministry controls?
We do not have meters on the field that the ministry could go and have a separate metering point that we can go to. What we rely on is the fiscalization points between the buyer and seller. So a BP and the NGC would have representatives that would come to not only check the calibrations, but ever so often they'll be checking how that meter is performing and how the readings are being shown on the system that is connected to the meters.
So then basically you're saying you're dealing on a good faith basis, but you don't have control.
So we can add layers of control to what we currently have, but what we've depending on right now is
please, my apologies. I wish to get a direct answer for that question.
Okay.
You deal on a good faith basis where you don't have control. Yes or no, please?
Yes. Yes.
So we want to submit that is the state of gas in Trinidad, which every citizen will have serious difficulty with. I would, of course, let the Auditor General determine what what would be the issues there in terms of accounting. But what about oil production?
Okay, so oil is different from gas in terms of how the royalty is calculated. It's not on oil sales, it's on oil production. Okay? So when you look at the points of oil production, generally, you have our Heritage Petroleum Company Limited buying a lot of the onshore crudes for use in amassing volumes of crude for export at this given time. It used to be Petrotrin would have been amassing crude volumes for input into the refinery. Other crude volumes are exported. So BP will export crude volumes from itself, Shell, Perenco. Please.
So
Yes.
Apologies again for cutting. Really, I'm just trying to get specific to the point where the ministry has control. So prior, we would have depended on whom? Petrotrin to check the field operators, the lease operators, or the ministry would check the lease the actual production.
Petrotrin's checks for the conduct of its business in buying crude, they would do their analysis, their checks, and then their numbers for what they bought, we can tie back into what the upstreamers would have sold to Petrotrin. So there's that sort of reconciliation taking place there. Again, as with the gas, we have no meters of our own that we can go and we can say that we have our own control over those numbers.
But I understand the difference with gas and oil, where there's heritage now, right?
Right, correct.
The issue with oil, what would we say, because you are speaking to the nation, what would we say would be an optimal, if not ideal? So ideals, we would leave the lofty ideals. Let's say optimal, based on the systems that are in place. What would be an optimal or a low-hanging fruit approach to measuring production? Would it be at the wells, where there are calibration mechanisms at the wells, or would it be at the points of fiscalization?
Okay. So a large percentage of our oil production comes from wells producing very small barrels per day, right? So you can say 2 to 5 barrels per day is probably on the upside of all of these hundreds and thousands of smaller wells. So what the system has evolved for a lot of the low production points is that you have gathering stations, and you have wells that go through systems called manifolds. So it connects many different lines to collection points that go to various other larger collection points along its way to the, as in this case, it'd be heritage, right? So when you're looking at the per well basis, sometimes it's very costly to put a meter on each well to be able to get the actual production, because it's going to be so low. So, yeah, please.
So I thank you for that. And no, time is limited, and my time is also coming to a very quick end. So I just have one last question, because you give the answer there.
Okay.
The closure of Petrotrin. Before the closure of Petrotrin, there was the issue of AV drilling and the fiscalization of oil. All right? And the two questions I have. One, are we sure that the issue with the AV drilling with fiscalization is not happening again? How are we sure? And the second question is, how has the closure of Petrotrin and that period affected the royalties in Trinidad and Tobago? So the first question has to do with, how are we sure the fiscalization issue with AV drilling is fixed? And what are the mechanisms in place to correct that? And the second is the impact of the closure of Petrotrin on royalties.
Okay, thank you for the questions. The first question, I would hesitate to give a response to that because of the nature of the question. So if I can ask to be excused from answering that one. But if we're looking at the general gaps in the system of managing the numbers for what would be produced, I think that because of what happened with AV and maybe other situations and circumstances that came up prior or after that, I think that there is definitely improvement that could be made, but I'm sure that improvement has happened arising from. So I wouldn't hazard a guess as to if it can never happen again, but I'm thinking that we are potentially better off.
I'm sure you understand that's not the real response I wanted. So
Yes.
I would change my last question. Basically, I want to find out, is there a conflict of interest policy, given the fact that our nation depends on these production measures for oil and gas? Is there a conflict of interest policy for persons engaged in interfacing with these upstreamers and the leasehold operators? And if they sign a code of conduct, persons so involved?
So we would have the public service regulations that would be our overall guide for how we perform as civil servants. But we also have some contract staff also at the ministry, and they will also be guided by a contractual arrangement with themselves and the PS4, conducting themselves in the right manner in terms of conduct of their work, and not to have any conflicts of interest that arise from other activities being brought into their work functions and work roles. So between those two frameworks, we would have persons who are interacting with the companies on the ministry side, definitely putting ourselves separate and apart from any conflict of interest matters that may arise.
All right. I based on, the dialogue that has been going on for the last half an hour or so, I have some serious questions to ask, but I want to ask Member Leons and subsequently Senator Henry to follow up now with some questions.
Thank you very much. We have been hearing a lot about the oil and the gas and production verification. There's also the minerals, and I know you all spoke about the unmanned aircraft system that you are going to get to have some level of control with it. What are the current what's the current process right now for measurement and for monitoring the removal of minerals for Ministry of Energy?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. The current process is the same process that existed and is established in the minerals regulations, which is the operators are required under the regulations to submit quarterly production statements to the ministry. Those statements are then checked internally by staff of the minerals division and sent to our internal audit unit for verification and auditing. Our internal audit unit, together with staff of the ministry, may conduct spot check visits to many of these quarries to verify that the information being submitted on the books of the operators are accurate. And we then prepare statements which are sent to the operators advising of their production and the royalties due based on the production. With respect to the unmanned aircraft system, as we had reported at the last meeting, we started the process. The ministry invited expressions of interest for the supply of an unmanned aircraft system for use in aerial surveying to assist the minerals division with three main functions. One, to conduct volumetric surveys to calculate volume of materials removed. So this is a verification system using a geophysical method, basically, and it would complement the paper records that are coming in to check and verify that the numbers being reported.
Sorry, I don't want to cut you.
Yes.
I read the response, so I know that you all are in train with that, and you all going out for RFPs now, right? Which you expect to probably have implemented in 2020, correct?
We are in the process of putting out RFPs, and we expect within this fiscal year to have this system in place.
So
all things being equal.
And I understand that. What I was more getting at is those spot checks. So just like the oil and gas, you're dependent on the persons who doing the mining to provide you with the information.
That is correct, and that has been the traditional system in the industry.
Right. Yes. What triggers an officer go in and do a spot check?
Again, it's a requirement under the Act that an annual audit be conducted so that the officer, together with our internal audit staff, who are auditors, based on the data that is received, they will go out and do their checks of the books. So almost every quarry would be audited on an annual basis, at least in compliance with the law. So the trigger basically is the law that says it has to be done.
Okay, so well, you would understand then that there's a big possibility for significant loss in revenue in that area. You agree with that?
It is possible to estimate production from a quarry based on a number of things. One is the acreage, two, the depths or estimated depths to which the operators are operating, three, their current stockpile volumes on the ground, four, the type of equipment they're using, the processing plant, etc. It is possible for us to calculate and have a fairly within reason figure of what is actually coming out of the ground right now. With the US system, we would have more accurate surveying, so our figures would then converge to a more accurate figure. So I can't say that we have 100% accuracy in the figures that are coming in, but with the new technology, we hope to improve on that.
Okay, so every submission to the ministry, you all do all those calculations?
Not everyone.
That's what I was getting at.
It's an audit. It's an audit, and the time it would take to conduct such an audit per operator, given the number of operators, would require substantial resources of manpower that we currently do not have at that time.
Just finally, are you suggesting also that some legislative changes be made to improve on this? Or would the UAS be sufficient in mitigating against those risks?
Not this specific issue. The UAS is basically a geophysical tool, basically to collect data, and it will collect more accurate data than a surveyor on the ground with a total station. Basically, it will collect a lot more data points, and it should allow us to compute the volumes removed and have a snapshot over a time series of the quarry as it operates, and to, within reason, have a fairly accurate figure of production coming out of that quarry. Once we match that with the records being kept, we know whether the operators are compliant with keeping accurate records. If they are not, it's a violation of the Act and regulations. So there are penalties in there for those who choose to cheat the system. Okay. But we require the system.
When in 2020 do you anticipate this UAS system to be on board?
That is subject to the availability of funds and the process for the procurement. And I would like to think within fiscal 2020, but we are trying to get it as soon as possible.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. Morning. Continuing along the same line, Mr. Bihari, I just wanted to know, in terms of the enforcement by the Ministry of, in relation to violations of the same act that you just referred to, has there been any in the recent times? I mean, have you taken steps to rein in illegal operators or operators who are legal but not compliant?
I can answer that by saying that, to my knowledge, something happened yesterday to deal with matters of that issue. What I can tell you is that the complaints that were received by the ministry over the past 2 years or so have been forwarded to the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service, and it is receiving the attention of the Commissioner of Police and his staff. And it is in the hands of the police to do law enforcement, and they are currently doing their investigative work, and they will then take the necessary action, and we will hear the reports as they come. Thanks.
So that's the procedure. You don't actually issue any order to shut or stop an operation, shut down an operation or anything like that. You just get the information that this person might not be doing something within the law, and you pass it to the police.
Yes, how the law is structured, although the law says, and I know it has been reported erroneously in the newspapers, and I'd like to repeat that erroneously. The Director of Minerals does not lock people up. The Director of Minerals does not have the power to arrest people charge people, take them through the courts, and prosecute. That is the job of the police. And what we do is when we receive these reports, we pass them to the police. People, members of the public can also report illegal quarrying to the police directly, or they can make reports to 800 tips or 555, and the police are duty bound to investigate and take action.
Okay. Do you have any estimate as to how many illegal operations there might be ongoing at any given time in present?
It is difficult to give you an exact number because it varies.
Well, yes, we know it would
depending on the activity in the construction sector. If there's a lot of construction activity taking place, what we have noticed over the past 4 decades or so, or 5 decades, is that once you have a spike in construction activity, illegal quarrying picks up. And when the construction activity slows down, illegal quarrying slows down. So it's correlated with the activity in the construction sector.
Do we have any idea what kind of revenue is foregone when we don't have enforcement? In your submission there, there was an issue of no data relating to the quantity of minerals mined, processed, and sold for 17 operators. You know, what kind of revenue would be, because if you don't have any data on them, you obviously can't tax them.
Yes, I believe when that report was generated by the Auditor General, this is a previous year, a few years back. Subsequent to that, the audits would have been conducted, the statements would have been received, the quarterly statements, the audits would have been conducted. So we have an updated statement which was submitted in the document, the submission, which shows that within the last 4 calendar years, 2015, 16, 17, and 18, we actually collected approximately 18.5 million from operators.
The number, 80?
18.5 million. Based on production, or what we notice is that the royalties, the production royalties match fairly well with what we expect is happening in the construction sector. So it's when the construction is low, we see lower production and lower royalties.
Did you raise something quickly?
Yeah, just following on that line. With respect to the unlicensed quarries, do you, or has any report been done with the value in terms of tax revenues and with respect to the actual value of the aggregate lost to the state or received in benefit from those unlicensed quarry operators? Let's say over the last 10 years or over the last 20 years. What's the value of that?
No study has been done to quantify that statement, so it's not really possible to give a figure on that.
No estimation?
I would not like to estimate a value. When it comes to mineral valuation, it's a whole different ballgame. Mineral valuation is a complex issue. It's not a simple valuation like a surface land rental value. It involves quite a number of things. It involves economics, it involves mining, it involves geology, it involves a number of factors. And without having proper data or collecting proper data, you cannot put a value on how much a mineral property would be worth.
Okay, I understand the complexity. Of course, I represent people, so, very simply, you go to a stockpiler and you pay $2,200 for a load of half and half. So how much half and half and sand and other forms of aggregate would the state have lost, because that is a state resource, over the last 10 years? No estimation, no study done?
We have not conducted a study on that, no.
Okay. The next question, do we have outstanding royalties uncollected from licensed quarry operators?
Yes, the answer is yes.
What is the value and what is being done to collect, improve your collection?
Right. It's 2 issues. One, the current outstanding royalties for the past 4 years is approximately $44 million. One of the challenges we have, though, before we can actually, we have been collecting royalties, But in some cases, we have persons who have challenged the ownership in that they claim ownership of the royalties, especially where they own the private mineral rights. And so although we have a large figure for some of these persons, we are now dependent on the Chief State Solicitor's Office to conduct the title and mineral rights searches for us before we can make a determination to go and collect some of these outstanding royalties. So to give you a specific figure and say this is the amount due to the state would not be correct at this time. We have been working closely with the Chief State Solicitor's Office. I know they are challenged on their end with respect to the resources to conduct some of these searches in a timely manner for us. So we have been receiving some, but I don't have a specific figure to say this is the exact royalty due at this point in time.
Is there a limitation period that would come into play to prevent the ministry from collecting these after a certain time has passed?
Not that I'm aware of.
I have some questions here, and then we'll go another round. I didn't realize Member Mitchell had a number of questions there. I want to clarify something. The Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance, said that the ministry had recent recognition of the need to work with the Ministry of Energy to determine the accuracy of the production data and consequently the revenues. Am I correct in interpreting what you said?
I said the practice has been that we would, when we deal with the Ministry of Energy, it's on a more macro level, production level.
Yes.
And if we
so
have
you just take the figures. Yeah.
And well, we would have our own information, and we would have questions. The ministry would go back and respond to the questions, but we don't delve into the operations. And I think given the exchanges here, there may be a need for the ministry to go more.
No, but did this recognition only take place with this particular dialogue today, or did this dawn on you some months or maybe a year before, something like that? I got the impression that you said it has been something that has come up.
Right. Well, from my perspective, my interaction is limited to the technical aspects. The practice has not been to delve into it. So okay. I am not, because I was not fully aware of the operational issues.
But going forward, you feel there is need?
I think there is, yes.
All right, very well. The second thing is that when we were talking about the verification issue, I think it was Mr. Rudder who said that what you do is to basically verify and put your signature on or initial on the fact that the instruments for calibrating were operating accurately, right? But then you also said that there was a control room that gave you a snapshot of data, not the entire quantum of data, but a snapshot, let's say at the point of verification. Who is the owner or the controller of that control room?
The control room is normally operated by the operator who owns the platform, so is the owner.
The producer?
The producer, correct.
Okay, yes. So that's where you would get your snapshot as a Ministry of Energy official in collaboration with the representative or representatives of the company that you are verifying the calibration issues about. Is that correct?
So the exercise is not to get the snapshot. The exercise is to ensure the instrument is correctly measuring. So the exercise is not to look at the snapshot as well.
No, but don't you look at the snapshot, or who looks at the snapshot?
So the snapshot is not looked at that point in time.
So what is the use of the snapshot then? When do you look at it? I thought that you looked at the snapshot in order to verify the accuracy of the calibrating instruments.
So that is not the control room will receive the data and do the calculations to
Yes.
give a production figure. But what is the output of calibration is not a production figure. The output of calibration is that the instrument is reading.
No, I understand
Yes.
all that, but I mean, why are you trying to find out if they are accurate? You are trying to find out if they are operating accurately so that you can be assured that the production figures are therefore accurate, aren't you?
That's correct, yes.
Well, exactly.
Yes.
So the snapshot then, it seems to me, would be something that is related to what you're doing, not so?
It is related, but it is not something that we look at when we do the calibration exercise.
Okay, so when you do the calibration exercise, the representatives of the Ministry of Energy do not go to the control room.
I can't say that they don't go, I can't say, all right?
You know, every question you answer gets me more troubled. Every question you answer gets me more troubled as a citizen, as a member of parliament, and as a person who has been in government. And I am sure that my colleagues probably feel the same. I get the feeling that we're dealing with a kind of runaway horse, and we just don't have a handle on it, Anyway, I want to ask something. Now, I want to follow up on something else, which is that you said that one of the aspects of verification, although loose, all right, is really the relationship between the buyer and the seller. And that a buyer would always want to know that they are getting value for money, in other words. And therefore, if the buyer agrees, then there is a pretty good chance that there is relative accuracy about the figures that you are talking about, whether it is money or production or quantum or whatever. Am I correct? Am I interpreting you correct?
Yes, so what I was saying is that the buyer is also present at the calibration exercise.
Yeah, would seek his interest, yes. So I understand that. But you are aware that there have been problems with buyers and sellers before. My colleague, Member Mitchell, raised the issue of Petrotrin. And you know that there has been a problem of accuracy with the AV drilling matter and Petrotrin. You indicated in your statements that the Ministry of Energy is removed from that process by taking the information from Petrotrin, because they do not directly get involved in the relationship between a lessee and Petrotrin, right? Am I correct? I'm just, remember, we are working here for the public. I want the citizen to understand what is going on.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you are correct.
Right, okay. So, now, when the issue of AV drilling came up, even if we didn't know before, we would have known at that point that there could be issues having to do with the accuracy of production figures. There would be issues in which the seller would get whatever money he claimed was his, but that the buyer could be in a position in which they were overpaying. Not so? We knew that as a fact. Even by simply dealing with that information, we knew that as a reality. Wouldn't that have pricked some ears and some concerns and some need to kind of tighten up the system all around in the Ministry of Energy? And were you affected by that, and did you try to do anything? Because it seems to me, I'm being minimalist here, two things were necessary. How you check the data coming from a company like Petrotrin, first of all, because you are removed from it. And secondly, how do I make sure, boy, that everything that everybody is telling me is correct? Yeah.
All right, so yeah, those issues are indeed very serious ones that can arise. Whether we would have been able to reach the point that we have reached now, where we are at the verge of closing the phase one of the committee results for the Production Verification Committee, I would say it took the discussions around the Auditor General comments, the comments of the committee, I think, to get us in a position where we was able to take the necessary steps to reach where we are. So I appreciate your laying out of that scenario, and I know that because we're looking at other countries as well, other regions, they too will also have an issue where buyer and seller could be in collusion for transfer of title to produced hydrocarbons. So when we're looking at that in the second phase, I think we'll take a lot more.
But did that affect you in your disposition, your sense of urgency, the need for vigilance on the issue of accuracy? Did it affect you?
I think that we are always mindful of ways that we can improve the system. It's just that because of how our processes were set up at that point in time, it was difficult for us to move at that stage, given the situation.
Okay, and another issue that would have arisen from that was the issue of conflict of interest. Now, did it occur to you that a conflict of interest issue would be something that one should be concerned about in the Ministry of Energy in relation to the control of the production and revenue requirements due to the country?
Definitely, conflict of interest issues will be something that we are very mindful of. Okay. So yes, the answer to your question is yes.
All right. Okay. Senator, follow-up. I still have a number of questions, but I want to be fair to my colleagues and give them a chance to ask questions, because I know they must be burning with some questions.
I want to deal with the revenue side and the collections of royalties from oil and gas. Can you give us an update on what are the accounts receivable status of royalty collections from oil and gas? And I think Minister Mitchell dealt with the minerals, but not oil and gas.
So just to put it into perspective, we would be receiving royalties on a quarterly basis, both from oil, condensate, and gas, and it's payable on the 21st of the month following that quarter. Okay. Now, in January 1st, 2018, we made an adjustment to our legislation to allow for a change of royalty. The percentage is 12.5%, and that's across oil, gas, and condensate. And that's not only for the exploration and production licenses, but also for the production sharing contracts as well. So prior to January 1st, 2018, royalty as a quantity was not collected from the production sharing contract companies. And there were also varying percentages of royalty prior to January 1st, 2018. And those would have had some historic reasons as to why those percentages would have been different. And so from January 1st, you had everything that's sort of being across the board the same, right? So royalty as a payment does not fetch any interest or financial penalties to the upstream producers for the oil and for the upstream suppliers for the gas. So that over time, we've had companies that are very forthright in making royalty payments, and we have had companies, through a variety of reasons, would not have been able to pay royalties on time. So in terms of where we are at right now, we would also to look at the budgeted oil and gas price in terms of when we looking at what will be expected as payments into the coffers of the country. And really that's what we actually will be collecting as time goes on. So to look at where we are right now, I think if I may request, I can provide those figures in writing because royalty collected changes because some companies might be able to make advance payments. Some companies might be paying royalty for a past period. So we constantly have a discussion with our sales Ministry of Finance as to what has been received, central bank as well, what has been received, and we could do our tallies. So I can provide those numbers, just not orally.
Could you also include the minerals as well, please? Following up on Mr. Mitchell, Minister Mitchell's questions as well, please.
So just to clarify.
So it is everything, all royalties outstanding for everything. Right. Oil, gas, whatever, condensate, minerals, everything.
Okay, so, yes, sure. No problem.
All right, please follow.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to go back to data verification. In terms of verification of extraction data, are the current practices of the ministry in line with international best practice? That's one. And two, what are some of the current trends regionally and internationally re-verification of mineral extraction data for the purpose of calculating royalties, etc.?
It's a fairly loaded question. The mineral industry in Trinidad is a fairly small industry. Compared with minerals worldwide, this industry is extremely small, minuscule.
So, okay, let's compare it to another place that is quarrying aggregate, that's the term?
Yes. Again, it's difficult to make that type of comparison, but what I can tell you is that we have looked at what is best for us here, not simply to take something that exists somewhere and try to apply it where it will not work. I've seen in different countries different approaches to mineral production. In some countries where there is a lot more enforcement, in the US in particular, the persons are required to have private weigh bridges on their property. And now there's always the challenge of persons not complying by driving around the weigh bridges. And you can't put someone to regulate every single weigh bridge at every single quarry. So it's not something that may work for us here. We actually looked at that, the feasibility of that working for us in Trinidad, and it was found that there were too many ways to cheat that system. So one of the things that's used internationally, globally, would be weigh bridges at every quarry. I know if we looked at that many years ago. I know the industry itself, when they knew it was a plan, they had some challenges with that because it would have been very difficult for a very small quarry to set up a weigh bridge. Very large quarries in Trinidad actually have weigh bridges, for instance, national quarries. But what we are putting in place for the calculation, for instance, the US system, the drone, with the implementation of drone technology in almost every branch of industry, drones are now being used throughout the world, Australia, UK, US, different countries, for similar type surveys. And these surveys can then assist with determining the quantification. So to answer your question, yes, by introducing this technology, we would be moving towards best practice globally. And it is something that, based on what we've looked at, will work for us in Trinidad with a small industry and for that particular cost.
Okay, thanks for the response. My other question, I wanted to find out what is the total number of quarries operating in Trinidad and Tobago?
Current number of quarries that are recognized operating in Trinidad and Tobago is 77.
But realistically?
That does not take into consideration the complaints of illegal activity which are being investigated by the police. So the recognized quarries, those that have 5-year licenses or those whose 5-year licenses expired and they're in the renewal process, as well as those who had cabinet approval and previous 1-year licenses and are going through a renewal process, that total number is 77.
77. How many have their license, the full 5-year license?
As of today,
Mm-hmm.
7 are valid 5-year, 39 are expired 5-year license that are in the renewal process, and the 31 comprises those who had a previous cabinet approval or previous 1-year license, and they're now going through the licensing process to get a 5-year license.
What is the reason why we only have 7 and the others going through the process or just expired? What is the process like so that those listening could understand?
Yes. The process is well established in the Minerals Act and regulations.
Mm-hmm.
Information on the process can be found on the ministry's website. We have guidelines, documents for the mining license, processing license, as well as flow charts. So it's very well laid out, and it's available to the public. Anyone with access to the internet can find it. But in general, the reason we have 39 persons with expired licenses is that when we issue a license, it's valid for 5 years, and persons would come throughout the course of the year to obtain licenses. The minerals regulations came into effect in 2015, and since then we have been transitioning persons into that new regulations. Some persons have had challenges with getting certain documents. These applicants who previously did not have state land leases.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to the regulations, we did not conduct the due diligence and the searches that we are doing now. I mentioned earlier the Chief State Solicitor searches for mineral rights. That's a very important search because it's not just for the mineral rights, but the surface rights. And from those searches, we are discovering quite interesting things, that some persons may have claimed mineral rights prior, and they may not have owned it. There are also persons who have come forward to us with applications, and when the searches are conducted by the Chief State Solicitor, we are finding title issues. So they may not own the land, or they may not be the sole owners of the land, or they may own part of the mineral rights. So some of these things are showing up, as well as some of the persons who need to get state land leases, who have been operating prior to that, some of them for decades, but never had a state land lease, has to obtain a state land lease for the surface, to access the surface. And some of these things takes time because the leases must come from the Office of the Commissioner of State Lands, who has to be assisted again by the Chief State Solicitor. So we are now trying to see how we can resolve some of these issues that result in delays.
Is the quarry in Tobago licensed, fully licensed?
The Studley Park Quarry has submitted the application, and it's in the process of review.
Mm-hmm.
It should be not too long before they obtain their license.
Okay. One final question. How many reports of illegal quarries you would have received at the ministry to date?
Over the past 2 years, we received 2.5 years, we received 92 complaints.
92.
Now, these complaints are not just illegal quarrying. I don't have a breakdown specifically to illegal quarrying to give you, but the complaints would have been complaints against quarrying, some of which would have been illegal. So the illegal quarrying may be possibly a third or half, but I can't give you that specific figure right now. I don't have that breakdown.
And what has the ministry done in terms of any recourse to the public because of that?
Yes. Over the past few years, we have been conducting visits with different agencies, including the EMA, the Commissioner of State Lands Office, the Water Resources Agency, Town and Country Planning, and some of these other agencies that are part of the Minerals Advisory Committee. And we have been working with the police and the Defense Force to try to bring some resolution to these issues. Recently, we would have passed on the complaints list based on what we received from the public to the Commissioner of Police, and he has his team looking into that now.
Okay, my final question. Is the ministry comfortable that in terms of, I'm just talking about my quarrying, comfortable that the people of Trinidad and Tobago are getting the just due in terms of what is being extracted and what we're receiving in terms of revenue? Are you satisfied?
I would say that we are not satisfied at this time, and that's why we are trying to put all these different things in place with the US system, with getting the assistance of the police to do the enforcement that is necessary to stop some of the illegal activity that's taking place out there. So I'm not totally satisfied now.
Just a quick follow-up, and then I have some other questions. Do you have the power in the Ministry of Energy to stop an illegal quarry operator from operating?
That's a difficult question. It depends on where the person is actually operating. If the person is operating on a state parcel of land, the jurisdiction for all state land falls with the Commissioner of State Lands.
Okay.
If the person is within state lands and a forest reserve, there's the Commissioner of State Lands, the Conservator of Forests, who have jurisdiction. The Director of Minerals cannot go or send his staff onto state lands or forest reserves without the permission of those bodies. When it comes to actually stopping persons and taking action, the reality is the persons who engage in illegal activity are armed, heavily armed in many cases. And the Ministry of Energy and the staff of the Minerals Division does not have the means to deal with that type of activity. So to answer your question, if we have to deal with illegal activity of that nature, the answer would be no. That's why we depend on the police.
Okay, so the first issue would be cooperation among governmental agencies to be effective. That would be the first issue, right?
That is correct.
And the second issue would be for those persons who operate the quarries for the purpose of financing illegal activities, you would really have to have military capacity of some kind to be able to enforce the law. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So we have two big problems here, which is internal, the cooperation among the agencies to make sure that the law is followed, because you have split responsibilities. And the second issue is the issue of simply violence and firepower, which can only be subdued by military force of some kind.
Yes, let me just add to that. The cooperation among the various agencies has been happening, and it happens often and very well. Again, these are the agencies that are also challenging that if they have to patrol and police those same areas, they are also met, and their staff are also met with the violence that you mentioned and the heavily armed persons. And none of the public agencies, non-military, non-police, are trained or equipped to deal with that.
To deal with that.
Yes.
And I suspect that when you talk about the firepower that they have and the violence that they execute, you are talking about most likely illegal firearms.
I've seen reports indicating that persons have been in possession of illegal firearms, and it is highly likely that persons who engage in these activities will have illegal firearms.
Okay, I just want to put that on the public record because it's important. I want to ask some more general questions that relate to why we are here today. And I want to follow up on some of the recommendations of the Auditor General's department. The Auditor General asked that the Ministry of Energy implement a documented process for the verification of production data. Given what you are doing now, has that been done? Has that been done?
So we are working towards that. We are working towards it, given where we currently have our processes and procedures.
Okay, so you're trying to do that now, but you don't have a system yet. You have not responded, you have not executed the recommendation of the Auditor General yet. Am I correct?
To varying degrees, we would have taken note of the points made by the Auditor General, and we would have incorporated into our existing systems. Where there is a bit of a gap, we have to take steps to actually consider if that gap, how that gap can be closed.
When you intend to implement this recommendation?
The timing of implementation, I think, would be, at this stage, not able to be stated.
You cannot be definitive about it. Okay, the second recommendation. Manpower audit to determine personnel competencies, etc., is required. Has that been done? In other words, you need a range of competencies to do the work. And the Auditor General is saying, unless you have those, you can't do it. Have we done that?
To some extent, Chair, I would say it has been done.
Okay, but I remember from the reading that you said 10 people have been recruited and that 10 posts have been created and advertised for. Is that what you're talking about or more?
Those 10,
And by more, I don't mean numbers. I mean things related to the building of capacity and competencies.
those 10 posts, Chair, are for the Minerals Division.
Okay, so it's not related to this.
We have other posts that we are recruiting for within the Ministry of Energy.
Okay, so can I ask a direct yes or no question? Has the manpower audit to determine personnel competencies required in order to police and manage the energy industry been done? Has that been done? No.
No, Chair.
All right, then commitment by senior public officers at the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries at all levels to ensure that internal controls are implemented, improved. I won't ask you a question about the commitment. I will take that for granted that you are all committed to do it. But have we set up the system of internal controls or improved the existing system?
Yes, Chair.
All right. So that has been done?
Yes, Chair, to a large extent.
Okay. Greater input by internal audit to monitor controls. How is that going?
To a large extent, that has also been going well.
So you've strengthened the internal auditing capability within the ministry?
Yes, Chair.
And they are more effective?
Yes, Chair.
All right. Implementation of the minerals electronic system, which would have tracking and auditing function. I think that question was answered by Mr. Bihari, who indicated that this is a more effective system because you really cannot manage one quarry at a time with human personnel. But you also answered to Member Webster Roy that the value to the citizen is not really realized in the industry itself. What would you say to that? And Mr. Bihari can respond, but I'm asking PS.
Chair, can you repeat, please?
The implementation of the minerals electronic system, which would have tracking and auditing functions, that has been implemented. I think Mr. Bihari said that. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. The UAS system, the response I gave was in response to the UAS system, which is the drone, basically.
Okay. So you haven't done that system then?
The Minerals Electronic Information System is a separate system. It's a database, basically, that we have built in-house in the ministry. And it's in the testing stages right now. It will be rolled out, it's probably next week, internally for the ministry. What the system does is basically it migrates us from paper to electronic. And once we have fully worked out all the bugs in-house, we plan to roll it outside so that persons who are applying from outside can submit their applications electronically online and track their applications. So we are trying to streamline and speed up the process also. That's the electronic system.
Yeah, you see, what I'm interested in here is the auditing function. You see, can the system that you have tell me how much gravel or whatever mineral is being extracted from the ground? Can it tell me how much has been done in the space of a month, 6 months, a year, etc.?
And that is the purpose of the Minerals Electronic Information System.
Well, yeah, but
yes,
can it do that? Will it do that?
It is designed to do that, yes. And then it will work in conjunction with the UAS data to do the volumetrics and the
So you've made some significant
so we've
progress
made some
here.
progress, significant progress. And
All
we
right.
have actually laid it.
Thank you very much. I want to go on now, though, to some of the recommendations that this committee made. And we only got the responses to those this morning. But I must tell you, I'm not happy with the response. I don't know what my colleagues think, but I suspect that they are not happy either with the responses. First of all, it only came this morning. And secondly, I don't find that they really solve the problems we are trying to solve with the recommendations. Do I have it? This one here. All right, I'll raise it. Okay, so for instance, I won't read all. I will try to read. I will read some. Now, look at this one, for instance. The permanent secretary should make it a priority to have all required documents ready for submission by the statutory deadline, right? This is so that the Auditor General can do her job. The response is the Ministry of Energy and Energy Industries has continued to strive in having all required documents ready for submission to the Auditor General by the statutory deadline. Did we meet the deadline for the 2018 Auditor General's report?
Yes, we have.
Okay, and are you going to meet the 2019 deadline?
Yes, we will.
All right, thank you. Then monitoring priority projects, right? Monitoring and evaluation units need to closely monitor every project under the Infrastructure Development Fund. And it goes on to explain, right? But the real issue is to establish a monitoring and evaluation unit to track the projects under the Infrastructure Development Fund. This is your response. A monitoring and evaluation unit was established on the 2nd of August 2018 with the hire of one monitoring evaluation coordinator. On a phase basis, the work of the unit has largely focused on monitoring and evaluation of MEEI 2017 to 21 strategic plan. So that is okay, that is satisfactory because you've done it and you've gone on to explain what needs to be done later. What I'm concerned about in some of these responses is that I don't get a definitive factual response that we have done this or we will do this by such and such a date. All right? Can we, given the responses that we received today, can we get something from you that is much more definitive? Because I think all members of this committee want to pursue this matter and make sure that we get the most value for money from the energy sector.
Chair, we would like to give more definitive responses, but where the responses does not lie solely in our remit and we depend on other external agencies, we are unable to give that commitment.
All right, give me an example.
Okay. Take, for instance, if we have to get the assistance of DPA, that is not within our remit, and we continue to work with them, we continue to dialogue with them, we continue to have meetings with them.
Okay.
To see if they can hasten the process for us. We try to influence the process by talking, having bilaterals with them, talking to the heads, but there's only so much that we can do.
So the DPA, you would say, is unresponsive to your
I would not say
needs.
that, sir. What I would say is that we are continuing to work with them so that they can expedite things on our behalf, but it doesn't always work out.
I think we should have the secretary respond, write to the DPA and indicate what you have stated in this report and what you have just stated, and ask that they act expeditiously to give the Ministry of Energy the resources that it needs to do the jobs that is required. And that the Auditor General is demanding of you and the PAC is also demanding of you, and you cannot fulfill these mandates because you are simply not fulfilled by the DPA. So we will do that from this committee and let you have a copy also of what we send to them.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for intervening on our behalf.
All right, and on the follow-up response on the MEEI should submit to Parliament a status on the number of quarries that have been regularized by February 28. You did submit an update, I think, by an earlier time, if I'm not mistaken. But I see here you have 74 new applications not operational. Can I understand what will be done to these 74 pending applications?
Applications that come to the ministry have a 90-day time limit. If they are incomplete and the outstanding documents are not submitted within 90 days, the application becomes invalid based on the regulations. So some of these applications may very well become invalid. I know that we processed 53 of those 74 applications. Some of them would have come in at different points in time, so it's not all 74 on the same day. So that 90-day time limit starts when the application is received. So these are in process right now. These applications are being looked at.
Okay, so let's say most of these are approved and they get their license and they proceed to do their business. How will we effectively monitor the ones that we are not monitoring now, and in addition to that, monitor these that are now coming on stream to make sure? Because these are fresh. So even if we make a mistake before, we should get all the money that we can from the new ones that come on stream, and we should set up a system to make sure that they comply with the rules, the regulations, the requirements of the contract, etc., even if we have problems with the ones before. Because you could fix that at some point in time, but you could fix this now. How are we going to ensure that that happens?
Yes, Chair, through the licensing process and with the PS mentioned, we have in place the recruitment of staff. We would be monitoring the new licensees much more closely.
So there has to be a monitoring
it is a monitoring
enforcement
function
process
yes.
for this, okay? All right, and another follow-up response is on page 9 of the report that you submitted. Section 40 of the Minerals General Regulations states all payments of royalties shall be made to the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry on a quarterly basis as specified by the Minister. However, many operators were tardy in their royalty payments. The license renewal process involves so and so and so. And then it says there's a negative figure for royalties outstanding in 2018 due to the receipt of bulk payment made by an operator in 2018 for royalties that were due in previous years and so on. But I didn't pick it up here yet, but in reading it, I saw where the Ministry of Energy actually acted and threatened the operator. And in fact, the royalties were paid, and then arrangements were paid with a second operator for a payment system over time. Are we monitoring strongly enough to allow us to do this, make this kind of intervention from time to time so that we get the monies that are due to the ministry and the state, and to make sure that energy operators of whatever variety comply with their responsibilities and obligations to the state?
Yes, we seek to work with the operators.
Yes, I would appreciate, I would understand that and appreciate it. So you work with them. But, I mean, I saw in one instance you actually threatened. I mean, I can't pick it up here now. I can't remember. Right. And they complied. They basically said, okay, we will do so and so. And sometimes it's not the best in an industry to use the big stick. I understand that. But sometimes you have to. And you got compliance, and you got 3 people to respond. So to what extent is this something that you have to monitor closely enough to make sure that they respond and provide the income that is required to the country?
We continue to work with the operators to understand any particular challenges that they have at a given time that will prevent them from making timely payments of royalty, because we know that there will be sometimes operational, sometimes other commercial pressures that certain operators may experience from time to time. Generally, we have operators wanting to be timely with their payments, wanting to actually pay royalties even before the due date. Some operators might make payments that come in maybe the 16th or the 18th of a month versus the 21st. So we have varieties of different capabilities in the sector. So we continue to work with the ones that are not paying as often or as quickly as they should to be able to effect their responsibility.
Yeah, but in one instance here, I saw one operator had not paid for 3 years or something like that, and you got the person to comply afterwards. Do you have situations like that now? Or are you on top of things, is what I'm asking.
Sure. That's a good question. The large quantity of unpaid royalty towards the later part of 2017 and 2018 will have been Petrotrin. And what has happened would have been because of the restructuring of the
company, I understand that.
We would have been receiving monies from Heritage, a lot more on time, as per their requirements, and the historic payments from Petrotrin. I think that's being worked on right now to effect the drawdown of the...
And you have no problems like that with the big companies?
The other majors, they generally make the...
They meet their obligations
generally,
on time.
Yes.
Okay, I will stop at this point. I don't know if any of my colleagues have any questions to ask.
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So I thank Mr. Butcher for raising a point about Petrotrin honoring its debts, Heritage honoring the debts of Petrotrin. But this is a question more for the Ministry of Finance. What of the billions of dollars of debts that Petrotrin would have taken off from Heritage? Who pays that? Is it corporation sole, or is it Heritage?
There's a set of government guaranteed debt that the government would have guaranteed for Petrotrin that is currently still within the entity that is Petrotrin, and the company services that debt, but it's counted as part of the public debt because it's guaranteed debt of a state enterprise.
Which company?
Petrotrin.
Petrotrin has any operations?
No, the debt was originally in Petrotrin. I'm not. Yes,
Because
the debt was incurred by Petrotrin, and it is still within that entity that is Petrotrin.
No, what I'm really asking is, annually, the debt obligation is upwards of $500 million. Am I correct?
But there's several types of debt.
No, the 2 bonds that Petrotrin would have had, the 2 main bonds.
The international bonds.
Yeah. So they would have been the debt obligation annually in terms of interest payments and so on, and blended payments would be upwards of $500 million.
Yeah. Those are serviced by the company.
But by Heritage?
Yes, they're serviced by the company.
Can we get documentation of that?
Yes, yes.
Because that is not the understanding that the nation. That is not the understanding that the nation has. That those debts were removed from Heritage and that it will be paid separately. So if you are telling us that Heritage is paying that, that's new information.
You're saying the refinanced bonds? Okay, I will get the information for you.
Because I want to submit that from where I sit, it is not being paid by Heritage. Hence, they could turn a profit, all right? But if you include the debt obligation of the bonds, Heritage would make a loss.
Okay. I'm not aware of that information, but I'll get that to you.
So what you will provide for us really is the loan arrangements and the responsibility for meeting the debt obligations.
Right. Of Heritage, specifically the international bonds.
That's
Yes,
correct.
sure.
I wonder if I could ask the PS in the Ministry of Finance to simply respond as a kind of closure to what has happened this morning in terms of engagement of the Ministry of Energy. You've indicated one thing already, which is that you feel the need for more probing relationship with the Ministry of Energy. Would you like to say anything else? I will ask the Auditor General afterwards to comment, and on that, following her comments, we'll close.
Mr. Chair, I just want to reiterate that what you just said there, that I personally see the need for a more in-depth discussion with the Ministry of Energy in terms of production levels, pricing, and certainly the reports will provide a lot of information for us in that regard. So that is the undertaking, and as I said before, the Treasury Division will also undertake to work with the Ministry of Energy to improve the various auditing and accounting systems. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So, Auditor General, I mean, you've heard the entire discussion. I mean, you know what your recommendations were. You know what ours were. You've seen the responses from the Ministry of Energy. You've also heard the responses here. You are also privy to other documents which we did not raise in this particular forum. And I wanted to ask you if you'd like to make some final comments before we close the meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I think from an audit perspective, and from the providing the country with assurance that the revenues generated are complete, would still have us with some concern. We are speaking here strictly about the production data, which is the foundation and the core of revenue generation. And it speaks to revenue generation not only with regard to royalties, but we have not even covered the issue of taxation. We have not covered the issue of profits generated, which again would be based on the concept of the production data. So while we take under advisement the improvements and the steps that are being taken, we have to consider whether going forward, when we assess in this financial year, the underpinning materiality of the revenue figure, whether we are knowing with a true fact whether revenues or revenue receipts are being properly brought to account. We may have to expand our limitation of scope. Where we spoke specifically of Section 4, we may now have to also include this as a limitation of scope. Because it is the foundation. And when you look at the various receipts, the Green Levy Fund, the petroleum profit taxes, the supplementary petroleum taxes, you look at royalties both from minerals, extractive industries, as well as royalties coming out of the oil and gas industry. And given the level of responses that we have received here today, it still leaves us with some questions. We are proposing as a team to perhaps look at how we will generate. We propose to act a more detailed questionnaire survey, so please be aware of that we will be asking more details questionnaire with a view to also looking at the internal controls looking at what sort of mitigating controls the ministry has established to mitigate the risk that the company's data that they are receiving may not be totally in sync. So we have to look at all of those things in this year so that we can, provide an audit opinion. And if we are unable to, then we would have to state that as well.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I want to thank my colleagues, I'll start with that, for having a very probing and I would say intense questioning session with the Ministry of Energy. And that is a tribute to them as members of the committee, but it's also a tribute to how important the energy industry is to this country, how important are the issues raised by the Auditor General in this matter, related to these matters, and how much we are concerned about reasonable and expeditious responses to the recommendations we made having to do with the Ministry of Energy and this sector. And having thanked my colleagues, I want to thank the Ministry of Energy. The one thing I would say about you is that not for a moment during the answering of the question did I doubt the veracity or the sincerity of the information provided to this committee. I thought you were very forthright, and you stated what you had to state, and therefore some of the glaring issues that remain issues of concern remain before us. I don't think that you tried to cover up or make nicer than it is anything. So that meant that, in my view, you were truthful, and I think my colleagues would agree with me, but it also points to the several challenges that we must address as quickly as we can in the Ministry of Energy to deal with this particular sector. I want to thank the Ministry of Finance also for being here present and for contributing. P.S., I thought your also forthright responses, honest, straightforward responses, were very good and strengthened the nature of this particular meeting today. And I want to thank the media for covering this particular PAC meeting, and we hope that the general public will benefit from the information that was provided here today by all parties concerned. So thank you all very much. We are happy to have been part of this public information meeting of the PAC, and we thank you for participating so fully and so responsibly. Thank you very, very much. The Auditor General's Department, I don't know if I did that, but I mean, I thank you, of course, for all the work and for the collaboration that we have established between the PAC and the Auditor General's office to make sure that we get the governance process going in a constructive way and improve constantly all the time, no matter which entity. All right? Thank you very much.